Savvy Business Radio, drawing out the best from our guests with our host, Christina Nichman.
Our guest today is Rebecca Teasdale of TRIspective Group, sharing how to use effective communication to create a high-performing team. Find out more about her and her business at TRIspectivegroup.com. Hi, Rebecca. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you.
Well, I'm so blessed to have you here today. You're going to be talking about a very important topic. Actually, we recorded earlier. We're talking about listening, and March was Listening Month, International Listening Month. But we weren't able to get you on in March, but it's important, nevertheless, any time of the year, how great leaders and business owners can listen to the people around them to build a more successful business and a more successful life. Listening is a very important tool that often doesn't get utilized enough in our life or in our business, and you're going to help us with that. But before we go to sharing that great wisdom, share with the audience a little bit about your background.
Yeah, my business partners and I, who founded the TRIspective Group, we all started our careers inside of big organizations. We did organizational consulting and ran HR functions and set up internal coaching functions to help leaders be more successful. And in that period, we learned a ton about what create success for leaders and organizations. And we finally decided to take our knowledge and go external with it. So we founded the TRIspective Group about 10 years ago. And ever since, we've been working across the globe, across industries, helping organizations and leaders understand how they can be more effective, fulfill their potential, and bring more value to the companies they work for.
I love that. And this is important not just for the top officers of big companies, but also just if you're an entrepreneur with a couple of employees to really get a handle on how to better communicate. I think that people misunderstand communication or speaking or understanding or listening to each other, because I'll go to big organizations. I'm a consultant in AR. And I've gone into big organizations and they said, oh, well, we're having problems here, there, and whatever. And I'll talk to management, I'll talk to the employees, and they'll be on two totally different tracks, both thinking the other doesn't understand them or hear where they're coming from. How do you really get a handle working with people and companies and having them really communicate and understand each other? Because it's one thing just to say things and be in a boardroom and you're talking, but how do you get both sides to really listen and understand each other?
Well, I think it starts with a mindset, and you have to go into a conversation with a goal or a motive around wanting to understand and learn. So many people go into conversations with a goal of convincing or winning or getting their point of view across. And when that's your starting point, you're just not going to be opening to listening. When your goal is to listen, you will naturally start to ask questions in order to learn. And that is, I believe, a real game changer for people at work, but certainly also in personal relationships and at home.
Wow. Yeah, I get that. It's interesting. I've been in rooms where both sides are talking, and I think you're right. They've come into the room, either the employees or maybe the CFO or officers or business owner, with the idea that here's my gripes. And both sides are just throwing their gripes on the table, and neither side is really willing to hear the other side. It's really got to be a mindset where you're walking in there able and willing to listen to the other side's point of view. But now that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about communication, though, because I think some people think that I talked a lot, so therefore I was communicating. Talking doesn't necessarily mean communicating. Actually, communicating can be being silent and listening. Like, share that with us a little bit.
Well, and when I work as an executive coach, I kind of have my own rule of not talking more than 30% of the time, because listening in my role is so important. The problem is, through our whole education system and our early years in our career, we are kind of taught and trained to speak up, have a point of view, win the debate, be convincing, and we're not taught to listen and ask questions very much. As we get into leadership roles, there's even more pressure put on us to be the smartest person in the room, and it's where we get our validation. And there's just not much out there that reminds us to stop and slow down and listen as an important part of communication. And in my view, listening is where all the good stuff happens.
Wow. You are so, so right. And here I'm running this podcast now, I think broadcast for about 6 years. And I remember when I got started, I was so curious and excited that I would listen to my guests, and I'd be so excited that I would interrupt them and jump all over them because I didn't want to forget what's in my head and all the great questions that might come up because of the wonderful things they were saying. And my boyfriend called me up and said, "Stop it. Stop interrupting. Stop jumping on them." And he's like, you know what? If you're so excited and they say something like a keyword or a subject that excites you, pick up a pen and just write it down. And so I start to do that. But now, as I've increased my listening skills and I've gotten better, I don't need to do that. I just really engage and listen and go deeply into what the person's saying. So it's a natural conversation. Like when you're sitting at a coffee table with your best friend and you're so excited to hear what they're saying, you're leaning in. You're really listening, and you don't really need to think of what you're going to say next because you're really engaged. But how for you, have you helped people get there where they're less talking, more listening most of the time, or 30% of the time, instead talking 30% of the time and listening the other part of the time? How do you get them to a point where they're comfortable with that?
So I first of all, I bring to people's attention how important it is and what kind of good things can happen by being a listener. As a leader, I think your goal is to make sure you are able to hear bad news first. It's one of the most important things you do, yet leaders come in and they usually want to talk first. They usually want to kind of come out of the gate strong with an opinion. And once you do that, you've set the stage that candor is going to be lessened. You are kind of putting people in a position to take your lead, follow your lead, and to really get people to a point to where they're going to tell you what you don't know or what you need to hear. You have to start by, letting other people talk first and asking questions. I like to give people easy starting points. I love what you said about if you have a thought at that moment, write it down. I actually do that sometimes. It's a good way to start. I also tell people, go in intentionally in your next meeting and make sure you're opening with questions versus opening with talking first, and asking follow-up questions and asking probing questions and just resisting the urge. And once people start to experiment with that and see it, it's amazing how quickly they start to realize the benefit of making this shift from talking to learning and listening.
Wow. And one thing I've gotten from being around a number of organizations is that when you are that type of leader that you walk in and you're able just to be quiet and ask questions of your employees or the people you work with and say, hey, what's going on here? And hearing what they have to say. For one thing, I think it's what makes people excited to work for you because they're like, you really care what I have to say. You do value my point of view. And without stepping on them and saying, well, no, I'm wrong. I'm the leader. And this is how it's really going down. And then also, if you're able to get out of the fact that this isn't an attack against you as a leader or the business owner, it's really about just how they feel, then you're able to open up and have a real dialogue where you can begin to start to make changes that can better affect the organization.
Yeah, I think you said that well. All engagement and opinion surveys at work, one of the most important things that matters to people is they want to know that their opinions matter. That's like in the top list of engagement drivers. And so when you stop and actually take the time to ask questions, you're sending a very strong message that you value people. You value what they want to hear. What they want to hear matters. People want and need to be heard. And it's also how you learn. No matter how smart you think you are, you're missing out on a ton of insights if you're not slowing down and listening to the other ideas. What I like about it is it's free, it's easy, and it's just a matter of making a decision that you're going to do it, and then it matters. And it's a fascinating shift once you start watching people get that. The value is so clear so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca, I remember one of my absolute best bosses were like that. And when I started working at this organization, he was new manager to the floor, and people didn't like him because he was, of course, new managers. You change things up and you're used to doing things a certain way. So people were not too pleased. But what I really liked is he would invite people not only in the boardroom to speak up on their opinion and listen, he would invite you to a solo meeting where he would really have notes. And he said, I heard you say da 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 da. and that you feel XYZ. And so he's repeating back to you, really making you feel that, oh my gosh, he really, really heard what I had to say. And then what was really just the bonus and the icing on the cake is he would say, oh, great, I think you're good at this, so I'm going to leave that portion to you to handle. And, you're going to go forward and help us in that area. Whatever your thing is that you brought up in the meeting that you felt was really important to you, he would put that on you and say, okay, great, I'm going to let you run with that. And then, if it didn't work, we'll cross correct and change it up a bit. But it led all of us to feel like we were a leader in our own way in that department.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is reminding me of some very recent research I heard, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the author's name, but I think it was maybe someone out of Harvard. But there was a very recent study, maybe January or February, that looked at this challenge of people don't listen. And what the study, in general, in conversations, even socially, almost all exchanges are about people trying to get a word in edgewise and let people know how they feel. Mm-hmm. And the study showed that people who were good at listening and who asked follow-up questions were viewed as fundamentally more likable than the people who just talked. Yeah. And I'm not implying that the goal of leadership is to be liked, but it doesn't hurt, and it certainly gets a relationship off to a healthy start. Mm-hmm. And, I've seen some very, very savvy and self-aware CEOs get this, and they'll come in and just have a meeting where they come in with a set of 5 or 10 questions, and their whole purpose is to ask the questions because it sets the stage that what people have to say matters, and they need to know and set this environment of candor in their organization. And I believe it's a real game changer. And the example that you shared shows that.
Yeah. And now let's talk a little bit about candor, because candor would be that being honest. Now, there's such a way to be honest where you're just being disrespectful. And then there's a way to be honest where you're really just bringing the truth of the matter to the table in a respectful way. How do you see going about that in a way that's helpful to an organization?
So people make a trade-off because they believe that they have to trade off between candor or preserving relationships. So either I say what I say and blurt it out and risk hurting my relationships, or I hold in my truth in order to preserve these relationships. And most people are taught how important it is to be polite and not, upset people and hurt feelings. So they err on the side of pretense or holding things in. And so you have to get to this place where you're after the and. How do I say what needs to be said and preserve the relationship? And when that becomes your goal, you do have to say things in a way that can be heard, and that's a skill. Yes. But I believe that if people know you have their best interest in mind, they can hear almost anything you have to say. And people want to know where they stand. They want to know the truth. And if you can set up a working relationship where people know you have their back and want them to succeed, it's a lot easier to have that kind of candor.
Wow. I love that you brought that up. I remember many years ago, the boss I told you about that was one of the best bosses I had. I was probably just not even 30 yet. And he had called me into his office because I used to dress like a teenager. I would wear really radical, low cut stuff and mini skirts. And I just thought they were cute. I was into that stage and kind of wild makeup and stuff. And I was working in a corporate office. Now he was very understanding. I had good skills in the area I was hired to do, but he realized I want to move up in the organization and eventually probably move up to management. And he said to me, I want to have a personal meeting with you because I feel that you have a lot of potential. You're like a diamond in the rough that, you just need to be polished. But the thing I'm seeing with you is that you are dressing like you're in high school, and where it looks cute in high school, not so much here. And I'm just telling you that if you want to move up, and I'm seeing you've mentioned to me in meetings and stuff that you'd like to move up in the organization, that you're going to have to start dressing your age. And it doesn't mean you can't have fun, but you just have to dress your age. And I felt humiliated because I really admired this boss. And for him to say that to me, I felt humiliated, but I could tell it was coming from love. It was coming from him telling the truth in a respectful way without trying to hurt my feelings, but still telling the truth. And you know what I did, Rebecca? I went that evening to Macy's and purchased 2 suits with my friend who actually is very conservative in nature, helped me find some conservative wear that looked kind of fun and happy, and got some cute earrings so I'd feel playful. And I came in the next day and immediately started saying hi to people, and I carried myself differently. I almost immediately was elevated just by putting on a suit. And you know, a week later, people came to that boss and said, "Did you give her a promotion?" And he didn't. He gave me some advice. But that goes to show when you can give candor to an employee or to someone you work with love, that it actually can really, really benefit everyone.
So I'm so glad you said that, because all of us and everyone listening to the show gets this. We all have blind spots because we're all stuck with just an inside out view of ourselves, our perceptions of things, how we think things are. Yeah. And until we have someone who's going to help us understand the perceptions, our unintended perceptions that we create, we're going to be stuck, and it's those blind spots that are going to limit us. And when you have someone who's really committed to your success and they're willing to share those with you, those are moments that I think change our lives, change our careers. And I could, if we had time, I would tell you, you know, half a dozen or a dozen of those along my career that have changed fundamentally the way I viewed myself, my role, the impact I was having on others. So that is a great example you gave. It is such a great example.
Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, he's also the guy that actually got my business rolling. It was many years later where I, you know, the economy was up and down and things were changing. And he said, "Hey, I think you could wing it, and not wing it, but you could go out there with your great expertise that you've built over the past 20 years doing this type of work. And I think you could be explosive and amazing." And it was his prompting that actually got me thinking about starting a business. So a great leader, a great person can actually inspire you to, you know, live your great potential, and you can be that for someone else.
So, you know, exactly. And if you are listening, you know, to the show today, my thought is, can you be that person for someone in your life that looks up to you or that works for you or even a peer or a colleague? Can you be the person that, you know, provides, you know, some game-changing advice or feedback for them? And, you know, you're going to be remembered in the way you're thinking of this former boss of yours.
Exactly.
That's how we have a real impact. It's not through the smarts that we, you know, convey. It's through who we are as a human to the people we work with.
Ooh, absolutely. In fact, in high school, I was playing the violin in a chorus, and I love music, but I really was not confident. And I remember you know how kids are in high school. They're so mean sometimes, teasing you. And this kid said to me when I was singing, "You suck, you can't sing." And I felt horrible. I was crying. And a teacher who wasn't my teacher in any of the classes I was in just stopped, saw the transaction, and told me, "Don't listen to him. You've got talent. Just go out there and be your best." And da, da, da. But he kept me going on that road of, you know, continuing music for the next 6-7 years, and then dance and whatever. But like you said, you can be that person for someone else and be that inspiration without having to be anything that's a technical boss or a teacher. He was someone who wasn't a teacher of mine specifically, just saw what happened and decided to step in. And he made a big difference just by those few couple words, by saying, "Don't give up. You do have importance. You are talented."
Right. And even, you know, on our best days, our confidence is usually kind of hanging in the balance. Confidence is kind of one of those day-to-day variables that really has a big impact on how we show up. Every interaction we have with people impacts, you know, how they feel about themselves, their potential, their capabilities. And I don't think people really understand how they impact each other, especially in a work environment. And if, you know, when we work with teams, we help people understand that you have a role in the success of everyone on your team through what you say, what you don't say, and how you show up for them. And the highest performing teams are those where everyone on the team understands and is required to have each other's back.
Yeah. And
we do our best. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Rebecca, for you guys, when you work with the leaders of these companies, how do you get the leaders to use these skills you're teaching them, but to also bring into the fold all of their employees and people they work with to also build their skill in it. Because I don't think it's easy when you've probably been operating perhaps a company where you've really not been engaged with each other, really listening to each other. How do you begin to set that up where everyone's part of that?
Well, we start with the team. And so first we have everyone kind of figure out how to do this within their own, small team. And within that, we have them engage in some, feedback exchanges, like formal setup group feedback exchanges. We have them come up with a group of ground rules for how they're going to work together. Things like it's not okay to talk about each other behind their backs.
Yes.
We're going to support each other. And once you kind of practice that and get that down as a team, then people have to go out and kind of lead the charge with the people that work for them and throughout the organization. But, that kind of organizational work doesn't happen. It's not in the abstract. It's a very real thing where it boils down to every relationship you have in the company and what kind of impact are you having in that relationship. And so we really try to bring it down to individual one-on-one conversations and help people understand the role they can and should play to create a more powerful organization.
Yes. And you've created a great book talking about a lot of this, The Loyalist Team, how trust, candor, and authenticity create great organizations. And another thing that gets tossed around like crazy is authenticity. What the heck is that? It's like, I'm authentic. And I think a lot, and this is something I get working with a lot of organizations, they become not authentic. It's like not okay to be yourself. How do you bring that into the fold? Be authentic. Like I was, a playful person. I want to be in corporate here, but my boss said, hey, you can be authentic, but you got to dress your age.
Yeah, I think there's probably understandably some gray area around authenticity, but we really feel like there's not one sort of leadership mold that or cut out that everyone needs to conform to. And we really push self-awareness and understanding what's unique about you, what kind of special skills and traits and values you bring. And people always do their best work and are most comfortable when they feel like they're wearing their own shoes and can show up authentically. So we do a lot of work around authenticity. That doesn't mean that we still don't have blind spots, and we get to make a choice when we hear feedback about how we could be more effective. Is this something that would help me be more authentic? Could I show up stronger? Could I show up more powerful, more compassionate, more collaborative if I were to look and change some of the traits that may be getting in the way of being my best, most authentic self?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that helped me, both in when I was in corporate and running my own business, is asking my closest friends. Now, sometimes they'll give you a skewed version because they love you and it's like, oh, you're awesome and you're great. But some of your closest friends, like some of my best friends, will say, hey, they've known me since high school, and they'll just tell it like it is. They're like, well, sometimes you can, do this or that, or sometimes you rush too much, or blah, blah, blah. And so they'll actually be able to paint a broader picture of yourself than maybe you're able to see on a day-to-day basis. And also one question I thought was very interesting, Rebecca, I said, before I started my own business, what do you see me doing? If I were doing any business I'm starting, what would you see me doing in a business? And I thought it was funny that my mom said she saw me as a hairstylist. I was like, what? A hairstylist? And it's funny because she said, you're so creative. You like to be artistic, but I don't see you painting. I don't know how to paint or anything, but you love to play with your hair and your fashion. So I see hairstylist. So I was like, that's very interesting. So you can get different points of view of the direction you can take with your life, your business, just by asking the closest people around you.
Yeah, the closest people around us know us best. They see us at our best and our worst. And I think you can make it easier on people by asking them for the feedback. So they don't have to feel like, maybe this isn't invited or isn't wanted. If you can go to people and say, hey, look, what am I missing? How am I maybe impacting people or showing up that I don't intend to? You know me, you see me. Will you let me know when you see me having a moment that maybe isn't serving me well or where I'm not quite at my best. And inviting people to give you that it frees people up to help to feel comfortable in giving you feedback that maybe they feel like you might not want to hear.
Absolutely. And that wonderful boss I told you about, when he gave that feedback, I mean, I was crying. I felt humiliated, like, oh my gosh, he actually thinks I look like a little kid. Oh my gosh. But I went to one of my other close friends and, I said to her, I respect him and I know he's doing this because he actually sees potential in me. So I'm going to run with it. But I think the other part to what you're saying is asking for feedback, but being willing to hear it, even if it's negative, and being that this isn't a personal attack against you as a person. This is just them sharing some feedback that can make you a better person.
Well, and it can be hard. There are people who aren't ready to hear it, and it can feel devastating. Yeah. In my first job out of college, I was in my early 20s. I was very melodramatic and wore my emotions on my sleeves and wanted to, people to know what was going on in a very kind of overstated way. Mm-hmm. And in this first professional job out of school, I had a boss come to me and say, look, Rebecca, you're really, really smart. You've got a good future ahead of you. But when you come out in these emotionally charged moments, you make so much kind of noise that people can't hear what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And it was devastating for me. I mean, I spent weeks getting over that, but I understood what she meant. And I had never, ever seen it that way. And it became this kind of pivotal moment in my life where I had to decide, wow, I had no idea that unintentionally I was impacting people this way and it was hurting me. So I was able to kind of take that feedback, make that change. And, it was one of those points in my career that kind of changed the trajectory, and I was able to very, very much make use of that advice. But it took her being courageous enough to let me know that.
Absolutely. And one thing I found, you can't always get feedback from the people you want on what's going on. But what I found helpful for me, there have been times where things happen in my life I weren't too pleased with, and I would blame the situation or the other person. And I've gotten better. One thing that's been tremendous for me is journaling. And through that exercise for me, I was able to kind of step outside the situation or the event with the person and see how my role in it played a part in how the outcome played out. And it was able to kind of, listen to my own self from an outside perspective and actually change things. So that
I think that's a sign of true kind of self-awareness. And in the work I've done for 25 years in this field, no matter how sure we think we are that we have the read on a situation and something we did was justified and it wasn't our fault. Mm-hmm. Yes, that is always true, but there are always two valid perspectives in every conflict, no matter what except for, the 2% of the people in the world that shouldn't have ever made it into the work because they're, sociopaths or whatever. Everyone else, there's always, two equally valid perspectives. And once you can, you can be freed from being in victim mode and truly empowered to run your life and be in charge of your success once you understand that you too have a role in what's happened.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what I've come out of it with, that really this has made me empowered and not a victim, that anything that happened in the past I wasn't pleased with, the situation that, I played a part in it, but that's done. Let's move on. Let's take that, that failing and make it into lemonade. Let's go forth and become better. And you can do that by, self-examining, asking friends. It's just a learning process. It's not to beat yourself up and be like, oh, woe is me. Whatever. It's empowering.
Yeah. And when you can accept your imperfections and be easier on yourself, more compassionate of yourself in those moments, you can start to be more compassionate about others when they make mistakes. And guess what? We're all making mistakes every single day. We don't want other people to hold us to a standard that we know we can't fulfill, yet we so quickly will hold people to these high standards of perfection. And once you can just let down that bar and let people be real enough to make the mistakes that we're all making every day, then relationships will improve from there.
Yeah, I love that. For years, I used to call myself a perfectionist. And then finally I got through my journaling. What the heck is that anyway? What I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I don't think it's perfect, but I did think it was perfect while I was doing it. So it's an elusive ideal of perfection that you'll never reach. And trying to live up to it is stressful, not healthy. Let it go. Just see where you've failed a bit, where you could be better and do better the next time. I don't want us to leave here, Rebecca, without everyone finding out where they can find out more about you and get your awesome book. How can they do that?
Is TRIspectivegroup.com, and our book, The Loyalist Team, How Trust, Candor, and Authenticity Make Great Organizations, that's available on any online retailer, Amazon, Border, or Barnes & Noble. So you can just go out and easily purchase the book online, and we'd love to have you visit the website for some of the other tools that we offer that go with the book that help people apply these principles and concepts in their work lives.
Great. So give the website one more time.
TRIspectivegroup.com, or awesome. You can go to theloyalistteam.com.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. This has been so tremendous. I thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming to share your great wisdom today on Savvy Business Radio.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Savvy Business Radio broadcasts worldwide via a large podcast network, celebrating business owners, entrepreneurs, influencers, and successful individuals. Find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest. Call 732-474-7375 or email Christina@savvybusinessradio.com.